Waiting room. Great. Well, I think we're going to get started. Thanks for joining, everyone. So my name's Ben Gill, the head of the customer success team at OnePlanet, and so thank you for joining our session on climate and nature, how to join up these two issues. The aims to have an interactive workshop, so we're going to have a brief introduction from myself and Chris, but then really dive into discussions about how we can address these issues together. Got some more local examples of how they're being addressed at a community level and at the district level, and again have a discussion on that. So yes, I'll just be giving an introduction, and then Chris from South Downs will give a more detailed introduction. Just to give a bit of a background to the approach that OnePlanet takes, and what we want to look at here is that from our perspective, all sustainability issues are fundamentally connected. If we're going to look at health and nature and climate together, if we create communities where people have to drive, we know that if they're using fossil fuel cars, then there's going to be an impact on air pollution locally and an impact on our health. We know that's contributing to climate change, which is impacting our health in terms of heat stress, anxiety, flooding, but then kind of hidden maybe a bit more below that. Plastics are a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry, and we can and should recycle plastic, but ultimately it's going to end up in the ocean if it's not burnt, where it's then consumed by fish. If we choose to eat those fish, that will end up in our bodies, again having impact on health. And then whether it's a penguin on the other side of the planet, or whether it's a shrew in the South Downs, they're also suffering from climate change, plastic pollution, air quality as well. So all of these issues are connected, and what we want to look at today is how do we address specifically climate and nature together. And the reason we want to look at these together is in working with local governments or with regions, work a lot with officers who are trying to address a single issue and kind of trying to tearing their hair out trying to address that issue, and then finding that the way that issue is being addressed is actually creating problems elsewhere. So if we can identify a set of shared outcomes, then we can all collaborate on delivering those outcomes together, which actually can simplify things because there are fewer actions we can take that can address all of those outcomes, but it also leads to a better outcome as well. This is what fundamentally the OnePlanet platform is about. We're not giving a demo today. It's really a case study of how we're working with the South Downs. But if people are interested, we'll run a demo session next week for people to learn more about the platform, or just drop us an email. To Chris to give an introduction to the South Downs National Park.
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name's Chris Fairbrother. I'm the strategy lead at the South Downs National Park Authority, and I lead on delivering our climate change program, but I'm in our nature and climate team, and I'll go on to explain a little bit about our current work and why we're bringing together those two topics of nature recovery and climate action, and a little bit on how we're using OnePlanet particularly to support that work, and as I've said here, join the dots on delivery. Just a little bit of background on national parks and protected landscapes specifically. There are 15 UK national parks and 46 national landscapes across the UK. And we have a clear delivery role around climate and nature recovery. And collectively, as landscapes, we cover 18% of the UK land area. So we can achieve scale rapidly. And we're already operating at that landscape scale, and we have local partnerships to help us deliver. And in terms of visitors and resident numbers, we have about 1.5 million residents living within national parks across the UK, and currently around 250 million visitors per year. So we can really exert an influence in terms of behaviour change and driving rapid transition. And I think national parks have a strong brand and a high profile, which means we can often influence beyond our boundaries. National park authorities have certainly been trying to raise a level of ambition in terms of climate change and nature recovery, certainly over the last couple of years, and we're starting to work collaboratively at national level, particularly on climate change adaptation and adaptation planning, and around accelerating progress to net zero. And I'll go on to that's the sort of arena that we started to use OnePlanet within. We've become the first protected landscapes in the world to join the UN-backed Race to Zero initiative. So we've committed to drive action to halve our carbon emissions within our landscapes by 2030, and with the aim of becoming significant net carbon sinks by 2050. And how we're trying to do that really is by delivering what we're terming net zero with nature. So we do recognize that the challenges around climate change and nature recovery are interlinked and need to be addressed together. You cannot separate them, they need to be solved together. So the focus for the national parks is really on nature-based solutions. As an example would be new woodland planting, habitat restoration at scale, creation of new habitats. So we're really looking at linking that work to our nature recovery targets. And alongside that, we're also working with landowners and farmers, looking at can we accelerate progress towards regenerative agriculture. Alongside that, obviously a big focus for us is on adaptation planning. So we really need to understand the risks that climate change presents for society and for our landscapes now and for the future. As with all of the UK national parks, we've set pretty ambitious targets about restoring nature and driving emissions reductions. And I've given some examples here of the high level targets we've currently got for the South Downs. National parks have a kind of superpower on this in relation to the climate and nature recovery challenges, because it is why we were set up. And it's really about delivering them together at landscape scale. And as I said, we already operate at landscape scale and we have delivery partnerships. So it really is our kind of superpower. And what we need to do really quickly is work to ensure that the national parks are effectively nature-rich carbon sponges. And we need that to happen as quickly as possible. And that's the focus of our work. At the very local level, I've been developing an action plan for the National Park Authority as an area. And the priorities for our climate action plan for this year and looking ahead into next year is around delivering climate action through the planning system, which is a relatively new area of work. Can we develop policies that support sustainable build and and actually considers embodied carbon within the planning system? Can we start to use the planning system as a tool or a lever for driving down emissions and getting more sustainable build? There's a focus on working with local communities, particularly about supporting them to become more resilient, working with our local authority partners, and I'll go on to that in a bit more detail around how we're doing that using OnePlanet, to deliver positive action on climate change at scale, supporting the land-based sectors, as I said, farming and landowners to transition to a low carbon future and start to use the farmed environment to lock up more carbon, particularly in soils, and then supporting rural businesses to adapt their operations and support growth to a low carbon economy. I won't labour on this one too much. We've done a lot of science. We've set up some science-based targets around it in terms of net zero. And we've done this collaboratively, again, across all 15 UK parks. So we're using a standard methodology and we're using shared metrics and targets around carbon. And I've said we've made that express link between those ambitious targets and habitat creation, new woodland planting, and regenerative agriculture. And for the national parks, this is really about land use change, driving land use change and looking at the options, the management options for that land. And that will vary according to the national park. It will depend on local circumstances and the specific habitat mix that applies across that landscape. So in the more upland national parks, for example, most of the focus around habitat restoration is with peatland restoration, because that's where the carbon is. And in the lowland parks, it's much more about new woodland planting and agricultural uses. So in the South Downs specifically, there's a huge focus on new native woodland and broadleaf woodland and a shift to more regenerative agriculture. And that's where we can start to restore soils and lock up more carbon. I mentioned about using the OnePlanet platform. Probably about a year ago, we put in for some Innovate UK funding, really to try and use the platform to make this connection between nature recovery and climate. And we were successful in getting some funding from Innovate UK through till July next year, and we're using it to support work with OnePlanet to develop what's termed an ecosystem plan for the full national park. So that is bringing together the climate and nature recovery outcomes that we're looking to deliver. The project's really starting to help drive coordinate activity across a wide partnership and to highlight areas where there are shared outcomes that we can deliver with sector partners, local authorities and local groups. And it's starting to help us work more effectively across different levels of delivery at the very local level, at district level and area wide as well. And the lessons we're learning about this approach, we want to apply in terms of scaling up. So we're really thinking about this beyond July 2025. Can we scale this up to become a common framework at national level? And we've been in discussion with the other UK parks about potentially adopting this post July next year. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the challenge, the South Downs National Park is about 1,650 square kilometres. We work with 15 local authorities across our patch, a wide range of sector partners and local community groups, 176 parish councils. It's an incredible challenge to try and get a sense of how you deliver net zero or nature recovery across this area in a consistent way, and that's at the heart of what we're trying to use OnePlanet to do. So we started to roll this approach across the national park areas, across our 15 local authority sector partners, and it has enabled us to rapidly identify key synergies and join up between existing strategies and plans. And we're using it to create an integrated plan for the project area across those multiple strategies. So currently, and we're halfway through the project, we mapped 65 separate strategies onto the OnePlanet platform. And this has enabled the core project partners to be a lot more joined up about delivering those core priorities. It's supporting us in terms of strategy development and tracking and driving progress across that partnership. It's also identifying shared outcomes, which means we're able to work in a much smarter and cross-sectoral way. And that's also paying dividends in terms of developing things like external funding bids, where we can identify strong shared outcomes that we can convene together. We can put in external funding bids and really help accelerate delivery. And the other advantage of using the platform so far is because we've been able to include UK net zero and nature recovery policies as part of that platform, as part of the map, it's possible for us to link and understand the contribution that's being made to those UK targets from, again, across that, from the very local level to the district level to the national park wide level. And just to illustrate, really, we recognise the importance of local community groups in terms of delivering climate action and nature recovery. We're seeing a proliferation of climate action networks and groups setting up across the park. We're trying to help support and build that capacity and support them to share best practice. And I think it's really important to support these climate hubs because they have a much bigger impact in their surrounding communities with our support. And also with key challenges like climate change and nature recovery, getting a sense of the contribution that they can make to the bigger picture does help motivate people they really want to do something and they really want to help. So we plan to use the platform really as a knowledge sharing platform as well, so we can accelerate learning and encourage new projects and share best practice experience across those communities within the park. And just to illustrate, we're starting to map this a little bit. And as recently, we've mapped 38 climate action networks within the park, but they are growing, they're proliferating, and they are mentoring and supporting each other. So we expect that number to grow. So just very quickly, some key findings so far about what we're finding using the platform. Definitely at the county level, we're seeing a role for the platform in supporting greater strategic collaboration between county level councils and ourselves. At the district and borough level, we're seeing a role for the platform in helping support them to review and update their existing climate strategies and really get behind local delivery. And some of the workshop events we've been holding using the platform and training people up to use it is starting to engage with that local community group level as well. So we're bringing them into the mix. And I think the general sense we get is everyone is keen to use the platform to ensure that they can contribute and play a greater role in delivering net zero and climate action. So I think that's my last slide. So I was going to just pause there, but thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. So the next session, we want to go into breakout rooms, which I have been trying to set up while Chris is speaking, which is definitely the most stressful thing I've tried to do on a webinar recently. But I believe everyone is set up into approximately equal groups. And so what we would like to do is just discuss kind of around 3 points. So what are the key links between climate and nature? Where do we see those and how should they be addressed? What plans and strategies and organizations need to be involved to address these issues? So how can we address them together, and who needs to be involved? And then it'd be great to get any examples of good practice, so where you've seen these two issues being addressed together, and the benefit that has brought. So we'll go into groups to discuss that, and then if your group can feed back one key link and one piece of good practice, that would be great. So we'll have about 5 minutes, 15 minutes in the groups, and I'll try and send out a message to warn you a couple of minutes before it's ending. There should be a moderator in each group who will try and encourage someone to feed back afterwards. I suggest that if you just introduce yourselves at the beginning, but don't spend too long, just kind of who you are and who you work for would be great, and then dive into these questions. So without further ado, I'm going to open the rooms. But it would be great if each group could just feedback kind of one of the key links between nature and climate that they discussed, and an example of any case study, best practice that has been addressing those two issues together. Is someone from room 1 happy to feedback?
Which room will we room 1? I'm happy to feedback, Ben.
I think Alice and I were technically room 1, if that's okay. So I can do a quick comment. So we were talking about the differences between our two contexts in terms of landscape level, and going from city borough council level to me in the Cairngorms National Park. And we were talking, I was talking in particular, sort of reflecting on what Chris had said about the pathway to net zero and the opportunities that the Cairngorms National Park in particular has to contribute to national net zero targets in terms of just our landscape level assets, and how we can work with partners and residents and lots of different users to kind of try and leverage that over the coming years. And we, in terms of that, we were both talking about like the idea that we are just trying to do what we can, acknowledging that the scale of things is pretty challenging and overwhelming. And so at both organizations, we're just trying to look for ways that we can do what we can, and across partnerships and within our organizations as well. And in terms of examples of good practice, we were kind of struggling to think of like specific examples, but some of the things that we talked about were the role of public health as a way to kind of access biodiversity and resilience and climate adaptation, and also culture. I was reflecting on the fact that a significant amount of funding on the program that I work on is coming from National Lottery Heritage funding, and so like using cultural heritage as a way to support resilience and the capacity for organizations to deliver for climate and nature together, whether that's at a heritage landscape level, which has been done in the past, or across different aspects that we're talking about, or even like through local communities as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. And I have worked out how to see who is in each room. Hannah, are you able to feedback from room 2? And yeah, if you can try and be summarize in 1 minute, that would be great. But that was great, Chris.
Yeah, so one of the key links that we talked about between climate and nature is soil. So soil being a marker of nature and biodiversity and how well nature's doing, but also the potential for sort of carbon sequestration, and that kind of carbon sink. And then we sort of moved on to discussion around sort of working at landscape scale, so working for both nature recovery and climate resilience through adapting land management, and part of that as being kind of understanding landscape as part of a sort of landscape change, and the sort of like the next stage as being like sort of new iteration of that. And Andy gave an example of good practice through a sort of recent planning application, Eastbourne, which was transforming one of the farms owned by the council into a cultural educational visitor centre through kind of BNG model, sustainable transport and retrofitting.
Thank you, Hannah. Room 3 was Mandy's room. Mandy Loam.
Hello. We were talking about whether you meant the links between the two as far as engagement goes, or whether you meant links between the two as far as action goes. We were talking about the importance of getting those who might be considered hard to engage, all parts of the community, in fact, and how you would engage them. We were saying that it's a very broad question, so it's very difficult to go into any specifics, but we did talk about regenerative land use and the use of carbon sinks, and the importance of working at a smaller scale, so that they were things that could be measured and could be solved by communities and solve multiple issues at one time. We were talking about an example of that in Brighton called Celebrate Your Street Plants, which was it in Brighton? Sorry, I think it was. This was because the council had decided to use glyphosate for weeds on the streets. And so engaging the community in understanding plants within your community areas to kind of, enable people to understand why we perhaps don't want to spray. We were talking about the importance of baselines and how ground truthing is very important with baselining, so that we can see the improvements that have been made as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mandy. Room 4, Amanda. Or someone in room 4. Yeah.
I took a load of notes. So basically, we felt that climate and nature, it was intrinsically linked. Did just have a discussion about all should be involved, and it should be every organisation somewhere along the line. It needs to be everyone will have an impact on this. We talked about engagement and communication and change management. There needs to be a lot of knowledge sharing. There needs to be the education, and also the importance of longevity of projects. So we talked about, so Alex was talking about her project, which is Trees for Nature. Basically, it's woodland planting. We're using community woodlands, but the most, I think one of the biggest things will be actually part of the funding provides 15 years of maintenance, so it ensures the longevity of that, and it'll have a big impact on climate and nature.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Room 5, Chris, that is your, or someone.
Yeah, again, we had a very much an engagement and comms focus on the links between climate and nature, and there was an acknowledgement that perhaps not everybody does recognise the link between climate and nature, and actually we probably need to do a bit of a comms piece on that, because often people don't understand the direct impacts around that. So there was a bit of a discussion around the behaviour change elements, communication bit about that. In terms of plans and strategies, highlighted the role of planning, which I think is underplayed. So local plans are key in mapping those strategies. Local nature recovery strategies, obviously, role for BNG. We had a little bit of a discussion around the gap in advice and support at the moment, because a big component obviously is land use change, supporting the land-based sector, farmers and landowners through that transition. And at the moment, there's not a lot of advice and support around what options might be open to them. So how do we address that gap? Who needs to step in was one other. And in terms of examples of best practice, I highlighted too, I think the work the South East Nature Partnership are doing around the LNOS and starting to join up across the two counties is very good. And obviously, because Chris Mackey's on the call, I'm also going to give a shout out to Cairngorms 2030, which I think is an exceptional project.
Thanks, Chris. And finally, room 6, I think, is Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we had a similar discussions. We were talking with the link was about it's. We were more talking about how it needs to be cohesive, and we need to work as a cohesive whole and not a disjointed working. We're all working towards adaptation, flood management, biodiversity, and need to assess the risk of climate change and its impacts on habitats, but also how that might impact habitats in the future and how they might change, and how we need to communicate what needs to happen with residents and working with landowners as well. So definitely we agreed that the platform could help us in identifying what our partners are doing, not just one local authority or one area, trying to work out what they need to do in their area. They need to work in conjunction with what's happening in their neighbouring local authorities as well, to make sure that that's working together rather than working disjointedly. And we also discussed that every strategy needs to cover climate and nature recovery, and that can be quite challenging. So anything that could support some good examples of how that could happen would be really helpful in helping embed climate and nature recovery across not just the climate strategy, but across other strategies that organisations have. I'm sure there's lots of other points that we captured, but if anyone wants to chip in.
That's great. So instead of giving a best practice, you've got a request for a best practice. So
Yes.
it'd be, if anyone has an example of a strategy that is addressing climate and nature effectively, please stick it in the chat. I think that'd be really helpful to see. And thanks for that feedback, because I think we've got some people really focused on how the climate and nature linked physically, landscape scale, soil, and other groups have really focused on linking that to the engagement and the community. So sort of different perspectives on that. Kat, if you can share again. So the next part, we wanted to just, having taken that big scale, just then go down a number of steps, I suppose. So start with Helen from Horsham, who is working on an initiative called Wilder Horsham, and then Karen Park from the Horsham Eco Churches will sort of go down a scale further of how she's working with her network of eco churches within Horsham. So Helen, while Kat finds the right page, maybe you can kick off.
Yeah, I will. Yes. I mean, it's excellent that Karen's following me. Not that that should be in that particular order necessarily, but we're very fortunate. As I go through this presentation, we're very fortunate. We've got a lot of really active and keen groups in our district, and I count Karen as one of those in terms of the Eco Churches movement. So yeah, it's great that she's on this in this workshop as well. So okay, so as you can see, I'm the head of sustainability and green spaces. Net zero nature recovery is basically my area that I'm head of now. So that includes the Parks and Countryside team as well as the sustainability team. So that immediately shows you as an organisation that we are linking the two very closely together. This, you know, this isn't rocket science. That shows you our three sort of programs. So Wilder Horsham District, that focuses very much on the nature recovery side on our own land, also across the district. A net zero organisation, I won't go into that. That's obviously that sort of the phrases of leadership, walking the walk, you know, talking the talk, walking the walk kind of thing. And then we've got our district climate action strategy, which is, as I say, for the whole district, and it picks up on net zero and climate resilience. So I'll go through this very quickly. I know Ben doesn't want me to take up too much time. So do you want to go on to the next slide? I'll just give you an overview with this one, and then the next one about Wilder Horsham District. It's a partnership with the Sussex Wildlife Trust. As you can see, these are the aims. These are for the Wilder Horsham District project. It's been running for 4 years. We've just had funding approved for another 3. And as you can see, it again intrinsically makes that link to climate change mitigation and adaptation. At its core is the aspiration to develop nature recovery networks across the district. So this shows you the map that we've got here. That's what we aspire to achieve through our nature recovery network. Obviously, that will then need to be hopefully fingers crossed, reflected in the local nature recovery strategy for Sussex, West Sussex. So obviously we're in close contact with them in relation to that. And the bits of this that I want to, these are the sort of project strands in terms of delivery. I won't again focus on the organisation, but we are embedding it as a principle within our organisation. In terms of landscape resilience and community resilience, that very much, there's lots of aspects to it, but in terms of the discussion today, it's really working in partnership. So it's advice to landowners, and that's Rich Black, one of our land advisors, talking to a landowner or farmer. So that on the ground advice, really, really important. Going with an open mind as to what they could achieve in terms of land management changes, for example. And the communities aspect, again, that involves a sort of combination of workshops, advice. We send out information, and also bringing, as I say, bringing groups together and trying to be inspirational, which I have to say hasn't been difficult at all. This one that you'll see now is bringing that sort of larger scale district network down in a smaller scale. So this is part of our district. What we did was we mapped our own land ownership, and they're the tiny sort of blue bits. But we felt that they provide a really good springboard to work with others. And I apologise, because really the South Downs is just south of this, so we need to talk to you as well, Chris. But you can see from this is, you know, to me, it's not just about nature connectivity and therefore climate. It's actually at the core is partnership and connectivity between organisations and communities as well, which is why I've put those slides on. I'm not intending to go through them as to who we're starting to reach out with, to who we're working with. And this is very much at a formative stage, but we've got opportunities here at that sort of localised scale. And, you know, the residents and communities in the village called Storrington really keen to be part of this as well. This is now moving on to our climate action strategy, which again, not intending to go into too much detail, but the key part is the rectangle in red, really. We've recognised that in terms of delivery routes, we obviously have a leadership role to play, but we need to work in partnership. We cannot achieve all of this as a district council on our own, and I would argue neither should we. You know, there are lots of organisations that we need to work in partnership for. And also, again, our communities, really, really vital in terms of delivering our aspirations on community action as well as nature recovery. And that's intrinsically interlinked into the plan. This, again, not going into the details, but you'll see the green bits are land use, and most of those relate to nature recovery in some shape or form. So again, what we've tried to do is link in nature recovery aspirations into our climate action strategy, acknowledging the link through to the Wilder Horsham District project as well. So the two are not, you know, sort of separated in terms of the way that we're operating as an organisation and the conversations that we are therefore having with partners and our wider community. So this is deliberately overwhelming, actually. Again, it was really just to kind of demonstrate how complex the picture is. And this is just a snapshot. I have nowhere captured all of it. That's what we're using OnePlanet to do, in all honesty, is to help us make sense of these, you know, connections that we need to be making. We need to understand policies and strategies are out there. And we need to sort of link into things like the Sussex Nature Recovery. So that's the local nature recovery strategy. We've got other initiatives that are going on in our district. Wheel to Waves, for example, through the Net Wildlife Foundation. We're working with businesses. And again, that's all about creating networks and support. We've got a network for our parish and neighbourhood councils as well, Climate Action Network. And the bit at the top is about trying to provide some, you know, sort of pump priming funding where we can. The bit at the corner where we've got a picture there of a workshop that we held for neighbourhood and parish councils. That was actually on the Wilder Horsham District project, and again, I've provided a tiny little snapshot of the numerous groups that we've got across our patch. So as I say, this was a deliberate attempt on my part just to show really the complexity of the obviously the landscape that we're all working in trying to bring together net zero, so climate action and nature recovery. We have got a lot of examples of where we're doing this on the ground, but I think, as I say, I think my remit was to just demonstrate how we're trying to link the two together. As I say, we do have practical examples of how we're doing that, and that the community, in all its guises, that can be, you know, businesses are part of the community as our landowners and farmers. So that's, you know, we're conscious of trying to have this network, and to be honest, whilst we're important in facilitating the development of those, we cannot take ownership of all of them, and neither should we. You know, often community groups, once they're up and running, have fantastic ideas, they know their local areas, and they can you know, implement some absolutely brilliant projects. So that's my very quick canter through. I was told I had 5 minutes, so hopefully I haven't gone over too much.
Thank you very much, Helen. And I think it's you know, great to make that link of how the local authority is not able to do everything and shouldn't be doing anything. And that's why we have Karen Park now to talk much more specifically about what a community group has been doing to link both to Horsham but through to the South Downs as well on addressing climate and nature together. So over to you, Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Park. I'm a volunteer speaker for Arusha UK and an authorised lay minister, Care for Creation and Eco Church at St Mark's Church in Holbrook. We're a Silver Award Eco Church and we're well on our way to a Gold Award. The Christian charity Arusha UK has a free online survey and resources for churches to record what they're doing to care for creation and to work towards bronze, silver and gold awards. The survey is being refreshed to take account of the most impact on climate and nature, and it's informed by latest scientific research. The Arusha provides free resources to inform decisions on further steps in 5 key areas of church life: worship and teaching, management of church buildings and land, community and global engagement, and personal lifestyle. I'm just going to go through a couple of those areas. Management of church buildings. The target is to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2030, to reduce our contribution to climate change and to demonstrate that change is possible. We're using tools like the energy footprint tool in the Church of England's parish returns, just where we simply enter our gas, electricity and oil that we've used, and it calculates the carbon emissions for us, keeps a record of those and enables us to track changes over the years and helps us to set goals. There's a wide range of resources to help us reduce emissions, including those produced by Chichester Diocese and the Church of England and other denominations. For the main advice for churches is to keep the buildings well maintained, buying renewable energy, wasting less, changing to electric heating when the current heating systems become unusable, and considering generating solar power and wind turbines if that's possible on some sites, and then offsetting what we can't reduce. So management of church land. So we're encouraging churches to actively manage their land to benefit plants and wildlife, but also to enable the community to access the outdoor space, which is so important for our mental health. These are some images from St Mark's Church at Holbrook, which is my church. One of the young people asked if he could create a bug church with help from his dad, using various things he found lying around in the church garden and the garden at home, which has been a great haven for wildlife. Somebody made some nesting boxes for us. Recently, Men's Shed kindly offered to create a pollination education station for us, which is just shown on the right there. And Sussex Green Living provided the educational plaque, and the children from the church had great fun planting the herbs and filling the spaces for the pollinators. We work closely with a couple of local preschool groups, one of which doesn't have much land on the site where they meet, so they regularly come to visit our church land. We've given them a raised bed, which they've been growing strawberries and beans in this year, and they come and sit in our little tiny woodland area to enjoy stories and to explore nature. The woodland area is just a tiny strip, but someone had the idea of clearing some brambles and making a little path through it, which the children love going through. And it just creates a nice cool space on a hot day because it's at the end of the south lawn. So the Pollination Education Station is part of Sussex Green Livings Trail across Sussex to boost biodiversity and amplify awareness of ongoing initiatives. Next slide, please. We were very thankful for Horsham District Council giving us a community climate fund. Great, thank you. So grateful for Horsham District Council giving us £1,000 community climate fund at St Mark's, and we consulted, as advised by the council, with Brighton Permaculture Trust, who helped us to assess the land. There were things to take into account that I would never have thought of, like where the gas mains are, where the drains are, how much light and how much drainage there was, so that weren't able to plant as many fruit trees as we'd hoped, but we've planted rare Sussex varieties of apple trees. You can see in the photo there on the south lawn, and a crab apple on the front lawn, and they're doing really well. We used hot bin compost, part of a scheme with the council where we have been composting the food waste from both the church, the vicarage, and these 2 preschool groups, and then we used that to plant the fruit trees, and some of the children came along and they had great fun helping to plant the tree and put the mulch around using a little wheelbarrow. And we've created a Psalm 23 nature trail to help people explore our church grounds and enjoying the peace and quiet there, and they can access that from our website. Arusha UK's Partners in Action working to help 25 target places and species. Those are struggling with the effects of climate change, habitat loss and pollution. For example, bees and butterflies, swifts, hedgehogs, native wildflowers and threatened habitats. At St Mark's, we've decided to focus on hedgehogs, which is one of the 25 targets. So we adopted 2 hedgehogs that have been rescued by the local wildlife hospital, Rangers Lodge Wildlife Hospital, and we released them in the vicarage garden, which we'd connected with the hedgehog highway to the church garden, which then gave the hedgehogs access to wider open spaces down to Chennels Brook, which is part of the Horsham Riverside Walk. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through what eco churches are doing. I've been pioneering how churches can use OnePlanet technology to tackle climate change and inequality. I've recently published a reference sustainability plan for St Mark's Church using the 10 OnePlanet living principles and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I've produced a OnePlanet Eco Church network template for any church that's interested to be able to use to get them started on OnePlanet. And I've been doing this in collaboration with both the Horsham community and the South Down National Park ecosystems. And the aim is that once a few churches have piloted the template, that it will be rolling out to the wider church network through Arusha UK, who are waiting for us to write an article for their newsletter to promote the scheme and to enable other churches to connect. This is the mind map a few days ago of St Mark's Church. So it's a little black dot that's in the middle there, and it's based on these 5 key areas of eco church life plus net zero. And I'm now working on the Horsham Eco Churches version of it. Horsham Eco Churches is just a group of churches in the local area who are working on eco church, and we're networking together across the denominations. But between us all, and particularly through the Horsham Eco Churches, which is part of Horsham Churches Together, there's a huge amount of organisations that we are working with. Originally, I just had an A4 piece of paper, double-sided, that folded in half into a little leaflet that listed these organisations and just a paragraph and a web link about them. I don't need to update that now because it's going to be on OnePlanet, and you can see what goals we're working together with, how we link up. It's an incredible tool for recording all of that and keeping it up to date. Climate change can seem overwhelming. So that was the mind map view. But it's amazing with OnePlanet. Just a click of a button, and then within a few moments it changes to the table view for managing, which I find really useful for editing things. And then another click and you go on to the document view. This is a page from the document view looking at local and sustainable food, and you can see how we've linked with the goals from Horsham District Council, for example, LW3 sustainable food systems, and our actions include working with the community fridge network and growing fruit, vegetables and herbs. Last slide, please. Climate change can seem overwhelming, but together we can do simple things to help our planet and reduce our bills. Horsham Eco Churches are very thankful to OnePlanet at South Downs National Park and Horsham District Council for all their help. And we'll let you know when there's more things that we can do together. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Well, both Helen and Karen, and great to hear how you're creating. The bit that really grabbed me was working with the preschool groups who didn't have access to land and giving them an opportunity to get out into nature. Plus, I love a pollination education station. That's just we definitely need more of those. If we're going to go briefly back into breakout groups, and if you can just give the next slide, because I think it's what we've seen through this is we know that on the ground community groups can be best place to deliver on a number of key issues. So it'd be good to discuss where community groups can deliver on the nature and climate issues, what support they might need, but also just to think about how community groups can provide more. Can they help you reach other elements of the community? Can they help you address other issues? We'll probably just go for 10 minutes into the groups. So just I will open those up straight away if I can remember how to. And yeah, just go into 10 minutes and then feedback just one example of where their community groups are best placed to deliver or where they can help further. Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming back, everyone. So we have 10 minutes left, and I definitely want to wrap up on time. So if each group could, in exactly 1 minute, and maybe I'll even sort of viciously cut people off if they go on too long, just as feedback then, where they feel, one issue that they discuss, where community groups can best deliver, what more they might be able to do, or what support they might need to do that. In room 1, is anyone from room 1 able to feedback?
Yeah,
Chris,
I'm here,
again.
Alice.
Alice, great, thank you, Alice.
Yeah, so my role as community and conservation team leader does a lot of that working with friends groups across the borough. So that's the core bit of my job. To say really quickly would be communities of both vectors for conservation, and conservation is a vector for bringing communities together. They have a huge power, and being a borough that's coming out of its 3rd bankruptcy with 2,000 staff cut, there's way too much pressure already put on community groups to do labour that they shouldn't be asked to do ideally, like cutting the grass. But yeah, I think they're a huge value, and the best thing I can do to support them is find individual pots of funding and try to be a bit of a thread. So I sort of send these long emails with like FAQs that as I'm meeting each of them, they're like, how can we get more volunteers? Where can we advertise this? Who's our local tree warden? What's happening with biodiversity net gain? So keeping them in the loop as much as I can together and trying to sort out individual problems. But it's probably much more than 1 minute to go into.
No, brilliant. I mean, and so I was in group 2 with Andy, who I think Andy was going to feedback, but Andy or Julie, and many of those same issues.
Yeah, I mean, we had an interesting discussion about the sort of infrastructure support that community groups need. Obviously, local council can't provide much now, but my little voluntary social enterprise, it doesn't try to do everything on its own, but it tries to act as a sort of infrastructure support for all the other really small grassroots initiatives that are struggling to get going and struggling to scale up. They can get plenty of volunteers because they're passionate about particular things, but they need the financial and legal support behind the scenes so that they can scale up and become entities in their own right that can grab a lot more grant funding. And that's what we try to do so that nobody had to start reinventing the wheel from scratch again. So and we had an interesting discussion about whether we could broaden that out to much more regional support, because there's a limit to what I can do and my colleague can do at a hyper-local level. But if we had that kind of regional support infrastructure somehow, that provided a lot of behind the scenes support for all the small, struggling, hyperlocal groups at the grassroots
Brilliant.
level.
Thank you very much, Andy. Mandy, who is giving messages at the same time.
I was just putting information about the integrated local delivery model in the chat, which was something that was put together and tested with Farming and Wildlife by Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, which provides a structure for bringing together local communities and specific members to solve specific problems, which then give you access to different funding pots to enable you to then solve the problem collaboratively together with landowners and managers who will be involved in those decision-making processes too, and should be from the start. In our group, we focused quite a bit on education actually, and the fact that in Brighton, I think you created a curriculum together with the teachers which is called Our City, Our World, which threads climate and nature throughout the curriculum. But this kind of needs to be a national thing. So very important to get it within education so that we can move forward, and these are our future decision makers. Councillor Rod was talking about in Seaford the fact that there are many different community groups, and it's about bringing those community groups together as a bigger force to have that change, which OnePlanet can do really well. And it's really important, I think, also to have in Somerset we have a one-stop shop for local grants, local community grants, and you get a monthly newsletter, and I think that's really important to have access to something like that as well locally.
Brilliant.
Throughout the country where possible. The end.
Thank you very much, Mandy. That was fantastic. We've got many similar threads coming through, which is really helpful. Amanda.
Hi. So what we talked about is how to enable a community and using local knowledge, and also how to build resilience. We felt that, or one of the parties felt that it was missing adaptation. They were focusing too much on mitigation. Talked about the unpredictable weather patterns and how we can adapt, and also it just being the big unknown. So it is trying to put the plans in place, but not really knowing what actually is going to be needed. We did feel like the council had to be a big part of this, and that they would have to provide support. They needed to listen, to respond, they need to react. And the biggest thing I think is the outreach, is having the right people with the right people skills to help with the change management and the support.
Thank you. That is very right people with the right skills is critical. Chris.
Yeah, where community groups are best placed to deliver, we thought they're very well placed because they often have a specific local focus. So that means they can deliver very effective local actions on key things like wildlife surveys or running repair cafes. Where they often fall down is with connecting up those opportunities and better, integrating them. So often by just changing what they're doing, they can deliver, say, wider public benefits. And often if they just, if they're talking that through with other community groups, they might get a much more integrated approach. So picking up on what you shared in this chat, Mandy. We didn't really get much chance to go into the detail around the financial element of it, but what we said was actually, looking at OnePlanet particularly, help with mapping to get them on there on the platform would be really useful. And we use the example of Seeker, which is obviously an umbrella group at regional level. They've got about 150 groups. It would be really useful to get some of those onto the platform and support them through, that. So giving them support to get their action plans on the platform would be probably as useful as financial support. And that, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Viv, because we didn't get a chance to talk about the financial thing, but you were making a point just as we were being booted out.
No, that's absolutely fine, and I think financial is only part of the support to be offered. So yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Viv. And finally, Sarah.
Hi. So yeah, we did talk about financial support, but sometimes that can be for space, premises or land for them to deliver a project, but also sometimes a little bit of seed funding from a local authority, for example, can really help provide match funding, or at least give groups confidence to apply for larger pots of funding that they might not think that they would be eligible for. So having that support from local authorities can be really helpful. We did also talk about the benefit of having a paid person, and we weren't really sure, we didn't have an answer for how that staff member can benefit, how to get the funds to support a paid member of staff. But often where we see project success is where there is a paid staff member that is helping support those community groups. So there's some consistency, such as in the South Downs National Park, we have a project officer for the Ouse Valley Climate Action Network, and at the other end of the park, we have the WeCan project. Both of those have a project officer that is then able to sort of seed support for all the local groups that are part of those projects. We also talked about Greening Arundel as a really good example of a project where there were many different groups on climate action in different ways across the area. And some of them would struggle to get together as a partnership under the banner of Greening Arundel, supported by the council. It's almost like that has the whole has greater than the sum of its parts, and how those groups are now finding they're getting more awareness by being part of a greater partnership. I hope that.
Thank you. No, that's fantastic, Sarah. And I see Helen's leaving. Thank you. I know probably everyone needs to leave. So I just wanted to summarise that. I mean, that session there, it's really interesting to hear about how much people think community can do, but actually how they could do more. For example, if they were able to collaborate, and if they knew what else could be offered. So how do we empower communities to do more as well? We will be writing up the notes on this and sharing them, but for those people who don't know about what OnePlanet is, we are running a demo session next week, so please sign up for that to learn about how the platform works, because I think it's, as people have alluded to on the next slide, I think when we're looking at the issues around climate and nature, we need to address those together. We know we can't do one on their own, and they both require collaboration and coordination to be implemented effectively, and this is requiring new tools and approaches, and you know, with OnePlanet we're aiming to provide a new tool that gets people to work in these more collaborative ways, but we know there are many more tools and approaches out there, and we need to be trialing all of those to be able to address these all of these issues together. So I just want to thank very much all of the people who took time to prepare slides and speak today. So Chris, Helen, who's had to leave already, and Karen, as well as all of you for joining and bringing your experience of climate, nature and community together. We will be sharing the slides and the recording and some next steps with you all, and hope to speak to you shortly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.